"You're a useless old man." Those words hit me like a sledgehammer, rattling the walls of the home I had built with my own hands. The house where my children grew up and where memories of decades of life lingered in every corner. I froze in the doorway, staring at my son's wife, arms crossed, chest heaving, eyes burning with triumph. Behind her, my son shifted nervously, glancing at me and then at her, caught between loyalty, fear, and disbelief. They had changed the locks while I was away, convinced that this would force me out, make me powerless, make me disappear. They thought my age, my quiet demeanor, and my endurance made me weak. They were wrong. I didn't respond right away. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply leaned against the countertop, letting the morning sun fall across my hands. I watched her pace, muttering insults, her confidence swelling with each passing second. My son tried to appear neutral, yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. He wasn't worried about me. He wasn't concerned about what they were doing to me. He was afraid of losing control of the situation, afraid that their plans could unravel if I acted. Little did they know, I had already taken the first step. I pulled my phone from my pocket, fingers steady despite the heat rising in my chest. One call. One single, simple call that would change the course of the day. I waited as the sunlight shifted through the windows, warming the edges of the room, but failing to touch the icy weight settling in my chest. They spoke, mostly at each other, planning, scheming, laughing, confident that they had me cornered. They didn't notice the small smile creeping across my face, subtle, quiet, almost imperceptible. Years of being underestimated had taught me something invaluable. Power often hides in silence. Patience, planning, and timing are worth far more than anger, shouting, or confrontation. I had all three in abundance. As I dialed the number, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a stillness that only comes to a man who has faced life, loss, and betrayal, and lived through it. I left my message with precision, clarity, and quiet authority, making arrangements that she could never foresee. She wouldn't know until morning, when she would see the consequences of her arrogance. I put the phone down, hands resting lightly on the counter, and took a deep breath, savoring the anticipation. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very people who thought they were clever, who thought they had defeated me before the sun even rose, had no idea the tide was already turning. Night came slowly. The house settled around me like a living thing, creaking and sighing as if acknowledging the injustice it had witnessed. I walked through the rooms, letting memories wash over me, the laughter of children, the smell of home-cooked meals, the quiet evenings spent reading in my study. These walls had seen life, love, and struggle. They had never seen betrayal like this. And yet, I felt no bitterness, only a quiet satisfaction. Tomorrow she would find her belongings scattered across the lawn. Powerless, exposed, and forced to confront the reality that cruelty and arrogance have consequences, I lay down that night. Not with fear, not with rage, but with patience. I knew the moment would come when she realized that she had been outmaneuvered by a man she believed useless. I had survived her hatred, her attempts to erase me, and I had done so with calm, dignity, and strategy. And when the morning light fell across that lawn, illuminating her misplaced confidence, she would understand in the deepest way possible. Underestimating a lifetime of patience and experience is a dangerous mistake. I closed my eyes, feeling the quiet, steady heartbeat of justice. I had been dismissed, ignored, and disrespected for decades. But tomorrow they would see who truly held the power, and it wasn't her. The morning came slowly, golden light spilling across the lawn, soft but revealing every detail. My son's wife woke to the sound of the mail truck and a quiet rustling outside. She yawned, stretched, and went to open the front door, only to find it unlocked. Confusion flitted across her face, quickly replaced by panic when she noticed the first of her belongings: a vase, a stack of clothes, small boxes, carefully placed on the grass. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling. She knew immediately it wasn't a mistake. Someone had moved her things deliberately. And then she saw more. The dresser drawers, the lamps, the little personal items she had valued, all arranged neatly on the lawn as if making a point. Inside the house, I watched quietly from a distance. I didn't shout. I didn't call out. I didn't even move too soon. She ran outside, her voice breaking with fury and disbelief, screaming my name and accusing the wind, the neighbors, anyone but me. "What is this? Who did this?" she cried, hands shaking, eyes wet with frustration. My son appeared next to her, still trying to maintain control, but the reality had already begun to pierce his overconfidence. He had assumed I would bow, that I would leave quietly, that I would let them dictate what belonged to me. He had misjudged entirely. I stood at the far end of the driveway, calm and steady, letting the moment stretch. Every box, every item on the grass was a statement. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten. The quiet weight of my actions carried the message louder than words ever could. Disrespect me, dismiss me, try to erase me, and this is what happens. Years of patience, years of quiet endurance, had built to this single moment. I had made one call. One simple call. And it had been enough. They tried to gather the items frantically, shoving them back into boxes, attempting to reclaim some sense of control. But the humiliation was already sinking in, unrelenting and unstoppable. Their faces mirrored the disbelief they had felt the day they changed the locks. But now the situation was reversed. My son's wife's hands trembled as she clutched a lamp, her voice cracking with fury and embarrassment. This isn't legal. You can't do this," she shouted, yet the law and the proof of my authority were on my side. I stayed quiet, letting her rage expend itself. My son, for the first time, looked at me and saw not a weak old man, but a force he had underestimated his entire life. The arrogance that had allowed him to believe he could dictate my fate crumbled in the sunlight. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but no words came. He realized the full weight of what he had attempted. He had tried to erase his father. And now the father was standing in quiet triumph, calm and in control. While the consequences unfolded naturally. By mid-morning, neighbors had begun to notice. A few peered curiously over fences, seeing a scene that was unusual, tense, almost cinematic in its humiliation. I stood on the porch steps, watching, serene, every line on my face settled into quiet authority. My son's wife paced, muttered, screamed, tried to gather her composure, but her confidence was gone. And my son, he finally met my gaze. There was fear there now, a flicker of shame, and something deeper, a realization that he had miscalculated in the most personal, intimate way possible. I didn't gloat. I didn't even speak. I let the sun shine, the neighbors whisper, and the realization set in. Arrogance, cruelty, and disrespect toward someone who had given you everything eventually meet their reckoning. When the last box was stacked and the humiliation complete, I turned and walked back into the house, calm, composed, victorious. I left them on the lawn, staring, stunned. And for the first time, they understood that power is not in shouting, locking doors, or pretending control. It is in patience, precision, and the quiet strength that comes from surviving decades of life, betrayal, and underestimation. That evening, I sat on the porch, a warm breeze brushing my face, and smiled quietly. The lawn was emptying, the items gathered by an embarrassed and chastened son and wife. And I realized that justice doesn't always need loud words or dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it's in a simple, deliberate act, in letting those who underestimated you see the truth unfold before their eyes. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, the balance had shifted. For once, I had the power and I had proven, without a single shout, that even a useless old man could make the world bend exactly as he intended. The next morning, I woke to the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft chirping of birds outside. The lawn was quiet now, the chaos of yesterday's revelation still lingering in the air like smoke from a fire that had burned out too quickly. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching the sun stretch across the neighborhood, and thought about the events of the previous day. My son's wife had finally understood, in the most undeniable way, that she could not control me, could not erase me, and could not bend the world to her arrogance. Yet the moment of revelation was only the beginning. By mid-morning, my son finally gathered enough courage, or perhaps desperation, to confront me. He appeared at the porch, hands in his pockets, eyes flicking nervously between the house, the lawn, and me. His voice shook when he spoke. "Dad, we didn't know it would go this far. Please, let's talk." I didn't answer immediately. I simply studied him. 70 years of life, of lessons learned through hardship, betrayal, and endurance, had taught me one thing. People rarely change when confronted directly. They only change when they realize the weight of their mistakes without excuse. And he was about to feel that weight. I rose slowly from my chair, steady and deliberate, every movement calm, precise. "You wanted me gone," I said quietly, "and you celebrated the idea of my life being erased. You thought my age, my quietness, and my patience meant weakness. You were wrong." My son's eyes widened, his lips parted, but no words came. I continued, "Everything you tried to claim, every piece of control you assumed over my home, over my life, is gone. You have no power here, none." His jaw tightened, a flush rising in his cheeks, a mixture of shame, fear, and disbelief. For the first time, he understood that the man he thought useless was far stronger than he had imagined. His wife appeared at his side. Hesitant, still trying to assert some semblance of control. But it was clear that the revelation of yesterday had shaken her completely. "Dad, we just thought," she started, but I held up a hand. "No, stop. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I wouldn't act. You were wrong. And now you see the consequences of dismissing a life built with patience, care, and endurance." I let the words hang in the air. Heavy and unrelenting, they tried to argue, to protest, to shift blame, but it was too late. I had already acted. I had made the one call, taken the one step, and now the balance had shifted irrevocably. I walked past them toward the house, pausing only to open the front door. "Look around," I said calmly. "Every item you valued, every possession you tried to claim, is no longer in your control. The only thing left for you is realization. And sometimes, that is the hardest lesson to accept." For a long moment, we stood in silence. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of neighbors starting their day. My son's wife clutched her hands together, shaking slightly. My son's shoulders sagged, his confidence shattered. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a deep, unshakable calm. The quiet satisfaction of a lifetime of patience finally paying off. No yelling, no shouting, no confrontation required beyond a single deliberate act. I stepped back inside, closing the door gently behind me. The sound echoed in the empty house, a soft reminder that the power had shifted. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to explain further. They understood. They would remember. And for the first time in decades, I felt the freedom of a life finally respected. A life that had survived betrayal, disrespect, and cruelty. Standing tall in the face of arrogance. As I sank back into my chair, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Patience, strategy, and the wisdom of 70 years had ensured that justice came, not as revenge, but as inevitability. The story wasn't over, but the lesson had been learned. And tomorrow, as the sun rose again, they would continue to realize the truth, underestimating a man who has lived, endured, and survived is a mistake they would never forget. The next morning, Sunlight poured across the lawn, warm and revealing. And my son's wife stepped outside, expecting nothing but a quiet house to claim as her own. Instead, she froze. Her belongings were spread across the grass. Clothes, boxes, lamps, and personal items carefully arranged, each one a silent declaration of her failure. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, her confidence wavered. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her triumph, her arrogance, her dismissal of me had all been undone with one call. My son appeared behind her, shifting nervously, trying to mask his own shock with excuses that sounded hollow even to him. "Dad, this isn't fair," he stammered, voice cracking. I didn't respond immediately. I let the scene speak for itself. Years of being underestimated had taught me that patience and quiet action carry far more weight than anger or shouting. They had assumed they could erase me, that I would submit to their control. And now they were confronted with the truth in the most undeniable way. She scrambled, trying to gather her things, her hands trembling, voice rising in desperation. "You can't do this. It's my house. It's my stuff." I stepped closer, calm, steady, letting every movement convey authority. "You forgot one thing," I said softly but firmly. "Respect is earned, not stolen. You thought I was useless, that I could be dismissed, and you celebrated the idea of my absence. But you were wrong. All of this," I gestured toward the lawn, "is a consequence of underestimating a life built on patience, endurance, and quiet wisdom." They both stared, stunned, unable to respond. My son's eyes, usually so full of misplaced confidence, now showed fear, disbelief, and a flicker of shame. My son's wife's face was red with embarrassment, anger, and the dawning realization that she had crossed a line that could never be erased. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten. The quiet weight of decades of experience, of enduring disrespect and betrayal, was enough. I walked back toward the house, glancing once at the lawn, letting them absorb the moment. "Sometimes," I said quietly, "people don't understand the value of patience until the consequences are right in front of them. Consider this your lesson." I stepped inside, leaving them outside in the morning light, powerless, exposed, and fully aware that their attempt to dominate and dismiss me had failed spectacularly. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a sense of liberation that I hadn't felt in decades. The house, my belongings, my life, they were still mine. And more than that, I had proven, without shouting or fighting, that even a useless old man can command respect, enforce justice, and emerge victorious. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. And I knew that the lesson they learned on the lawn would echo in their minds for the rest of their lives. The morning sunlight spilled across the lawn, sharp and unforgiving, highlighting every detail of the chaos I had orchestrated. My son's wife stepped outside, expecting nothing but silence and an empty house, and froze. Her belongings were scattered across the grass. Clothes, boxes, a lamp or two, and the small personal items she had thought she could claim without consequence. She stared, mouth open, eyes wide with disbelief. The smugness she had carried the day before was gone, replaced by panic and dawning comprehension. She realized finally that the quiet old man she had dismissed had outmaneuvered her entirely. My son appeared behind her, hands tight in his pockets, shoulders stiff, trying to reclaim some sense of authority. But he was too late. The moment had passed, and he felt it immediately. His eyes flicked from me to the lawn, and a flicker of panic replaced the confidence he had relied on. I didn't need to speak at first. My calm presence, the way I stood tall, and the deliberate pace of my movements conveyed more power than any words could. Years of patience, endurance, and being underestimated had all built to this one moment. I had made one call, taken one action, and now the lesson was unavoidable. She tried to gather her things frantically, shoving clothes back into boxes, grabbing small items with trembling hands. "You can't do this," she shouted, voice breaking. "This isn't legal. It's mine." I walked slowly toward her, cane in hand, my voice calm and measured. "You assumed I would vanish. You assumed I was weak, powerless, and irrelevant. You were wrong. Every choice you made yesterday, every insult, every act of cruelty, has brought you to this moment. And now you see the consequences." My son tried to interject, words fumbling from his mouth, but he faltered mid-sentence. His eyes betrayed him, shame, fear, and disbelief all mingling in a single expression. He had thought he could dominate, manipulate, and erase me. He had been wrong. He realized, finally, that he had underestimated the quiet strength of someone who had lived 70 years, endured betrayals, and survived every challenge with dignity. The weight of that knowledge settled on him, and he knew there was no reversing it. I allowed them a moment to absorb the scene. The boxes on the lawn, the disorder, the exposure, it was not just physical. It was symbolic. Every item represented arrogance, entitlement, and disrespect. Every item scattered was a reminder that underestimating a life built on patience and resilience is a dangerous mistake. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I simply stood, steady and calm, watching as reality sank in. They were powerless now, facing the consequences of their actions, and the lesson was absolute. Finally, I stepped back toward the house, pausing at the doorway to glance at them. "Sometimes," I said softly, voice carrying over the quiet morning, "people don't understand the value of patience and endurance until it's too late. This is your lesson. Remember it." Their faces reflected the full weight of that statement: shock, fear, and the humbling realization that they had misjudged a man who, in their eyes, was useless. I entered the house, closing the door behind me gently, letting the light frame my silhouette in quiet triumph. I felt a sense of freedom, of release, like decades of injustice, disrespect, and underestimation were finally lifted. My son and his wife remained on the lawn, stunned, powerless, exposed not because I had yelled, not because I had punished them directly, but because life, patience, and strategy had done it for me. I sank into my favorite chair, sunlight warming my face, and let the calm satisfaction wash over me. My home, my belongings, my life, everything was mine, and the lesson had been delivered in a way they would never forget. And as I stared out the window at their stunned faces, I realized something profound. Sometimes, quiet action and patience speak louder than anger, and survival, dignity, and resilience are the most powerful forms of revenge.